For 3 weeks now, the Russian invasion of Ukraine has dominated headlines. How Ukraine is resisting the Russian aggression, how civilians have taken up arms to defend their country, how Europe is facing its biggest security crisis since the Cold War. The current conflict in Ukraine, it has multiple layers, fueled by multiple issues. But at the crux of the conflict is one belief. Russia believes that it was betrayed by the West, that the West broke promises made at the end of Cold War. The promise here in question is that NATO would not expand to the east. Putin has long argued that the United States broke a promise it made back in 1990. While there are different interpretations of what was promised to Russian leader Gorbachev then, Russian President Vladimir Putin has long looked at it as a betrayal. Let's also pull out a map to explain why he thinks so. This is the map of Europe. The countries marked in yellow are the one that joined NATO before 1997. You can see the list. This includes the likes of Norway, Germany, Italy, France, Spain and others. But take a look at the countries marked in orange now. These are the countries that joined the military alliance after 1997. It includes several Central and Eastern European states that were once a part of the Soviet Union or under its sphere of influence. 4 of them, that is Poland, Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia, have borders with Russia. But the fact is, Ukraine could be paying the price for NATO's gambles. NATO's first historical gamble was expanding eastwards. Before 1991, NATO was confined to Western Europe. Today, it's at Russia's gates. If Ukraine joins the NATO, the alliance will be at Russia's gates. But the point is, Ukraine was satisfied with its position a decade ago. It did not want to join the alliance. But the invasion of Crimea in 2014 has left Ukraine worried. It wants to ensure its security, and joining NATO seems like the best option. NATO's second big miscalculation was the belief that Russia was bluffing. NATO refused to negotiate an agreement on Ukrainian neutrality. It hoped that Russia would back down. But that backfired majorly, as you can see. Russia invaded Ukraine and NATO was nowhere to be seen. Even all NATO ambitions that Ukraine had seem to have fizzled out now. Even Zelensky seems to have admitted that by now.
Ukraine is not a member of NATO, and we understand that. We are adequate people. We have heard for years that the doors were open, but we also heard that we could not join. It's the truth, and it must be recognized. I'm glad that our people are beginning to understand this and rely on themselves and our partners who help us.
Now, so if the point was a neutral status here, this could have been negotiated ahead of the war. If NATO knew that its doors were closed for Ukraine, why did it continue to talk about the membership? We're not the only ones saying this. Even the foreign policy chief of European Union agrees. Josep Borrell says that West made a mistake by offering NATO membership to Ukraine. He said, I am quoting here, there are things that we proposed then could not implement, such as the promise that Ukraine and Georgia would become part of NATO. I think it's a mistake to make promises you cannot deliver. Don't make promises you cannot deliver. That is the message for NATO right now. Over the last 3 weeks, NATO has pledged support for Ukraine, but directly, the alliance has done absolutely nothing on ground. Member countries have individually sent weapons, but calls for a no-fly zone or direct involvement were a complete no-no. A no-fly zone would mean that NATO planes would have to shoot down Russian jets. That would mean that NATO would be directly part of this conflict. The fact is, NATO does not want to get involved. NATO does not want to get involved in this. And this is not the first time it has said this. Time and again, NATO and the West have made it very clear. It is not a part of this war. The war in Ukraine is in its 4th week right now. There is no doubt about the fact that this is Putin's war. But to believe that the United States and NATO are innocent bystanders is a myth. With no hope left for membership, Ukraine could be paying the price for NATO's gambles. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.